This week on The Review, we catch up with Al Jazeera correspondent Zeina Khodr, who's been reporting from the Turkey-Syria border, recap this week's top news stories, and showcase some of the channel's latest documentaries. Hello and welcome to The Review, the show that goes behind the scenes at Al Jazeera, but also lets you do the talking. Al Jazeera roving correspondent Zeina Khodr is tough to pin down. She moves in and out of battlefields, reports from the front lines, and speaks to those at the heart of conflict. Most recently, Zeina filed from southern Turkey on the border with Syria, where she covered refugees fleeing ISIL, the Turkish military, and Kurdish fighting forces. We asked you to send in questions for Zeina, and she'll be answering them in a minute. But first, a look back at this week's news in 60 seconds.
Amid the grief, growing anger. Anger that another member of the Dawabshe family has died after the firebombing of their home in the occupied West Bank village of Douma just over a week ago.
Pakistani police are saying that some 280 children were sexually abused and assaulted by a gang of 25 men over a number of years.
Two armed attackers have opened fire on the US consulate building in Istanbul. And overnight, a bomb exploded outside a police station on the other side of the city, injuring 7 people.
All in all, a couple hundred people acting under the banner of Ferguson Action descended on the federal courthouse with a message for the Department of Justice. About 50 climbed the barricades, pushing up against police. In less than an hour, they were arrested.
China is unused to scenes like this. Sudden and deadly explosions jolting one of the world's busiest ports.
We now have Zeina with us to answer questions about her experiences reporting from the field. Hi Zeina, thanks for joining The Review today, all the way from Beirut. Zeina, we wanted to ask what the biggest challenges were that you faced reporting on Syria, but from the border on the Turkish side. What were the limitations of reporting from the periphery looking in?
Thanks, Aisha. Yes, of course there are limitations when you do not have access to the battleground, when you do not have access to the area where you are actually reporting the events, especially now that we're unable to enter Syria. You know, it has become very dangerous for journalists. We used to be able to operate in the rebel-controlled north in Aleppo and in Idlib, but we stopped approximately a year and a half ago. We all know what happened to journalists who were caught by ISIL inside the country. So you're going to have to rely on statements made by the different factions, and you're going to have to rely on video, on the footage that is being provided by the different sources on the ground.
To what extent did you find fact-checking and verification of information difficult, especially when all parties want to get their side of the story heard?
No doubt it is a challenge to make sure that the information you are providing viewers is correct, and it is hard, undoubtedly, to verify each and every piece of information when you do not have access to the area. But we can't forget that at the end of the day, our job as well is to relate to the audience the different statements being made, and sometimes there are accusations and counter-accusations, and sometimes you just don't have the evidence for it. But it's your job to state what both sides are saying. I can give you an example. There was a report that there were civilian casualties in a village in northern Iraq as a result of Turkish airstrikes. We were not there. We don't have a team on the ground. We cannot say for certain if this happened, but our job was to report what the Turkish military was saying, what the PKK was saying, what activists on the ground were saying. We have to leave it up to the audience to decide, especially when we are not there and we cannot confirm the facts for ourselves.
How do you feel about reporting from conflict zones?
I've covered a lot of conflicts over the years. It's not just Syria, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan. At the end of the day, what does a conflict or a war mean? It means human suffering. And that is a very difficult story to tell because you have a lot of responsibility. people die, people are injured, people lose everything, and it is your job to tell the story and your job to relay what they feel to the world. And this is, this is a lot of responsibility on any reporter. But covering wars is not just about covering front lines, bombardment, shelling, killing, deaths, casualties. It is also about politics, because people need to understand the politics behind every war. Behind every war is a political conflict, and that's where you really need to explain to the audience what was the political conflict that resulted in this war, and what is being done politically to try to end the war.
We'd also like to ask a question from Saeed Al-Jabri, who tweeted, "What is the most memorable news you've reported?"
Thanks for your question, Saeed. There are quite a few memorable news that I have reported on. It's quite difficult to choose which one, but there is one that does stand out, and that is the fall of Tripoli, the fall of the Libyan capital. You're actually witnessing history. You are an eyewitness to history. I won't forget that day for as long as I live. We woke up in the morning not thinking that the rebels will be able to storm the Libyan capital and declare victory. Yes, Gaddafi's forces fought a few weeks and months after that, and in some, there was pockets of resistance in some places, but the capital fell, and we had no idea that morning that we would be a witness to this by the end of the day. We were reporting from Zawiya, and we just saw the front line keep moving, and we just kept following the rebels until they reached the Green Square. Well, that was what Gaddafi called it, but we also witnessed for ourselves how rebels decided to call it Martyr Square, seeing the euphoria of the people. And just looking at their faces was an experience I will not forget.
Zeina Khodr there. And please write in via our website or Facebook page or tweet to let us know if there are any other Al Jazeera journalists you'd like to see featured on the review. That's just about it for this episode. We'll leave you with clips from a few new rattling films coming up on Al Jazeera. They're well worth checking out. See you next time.
In July and August 2014, Israel attacked the Gaza Strip for a total of 50 days. The destruction was widespread and the death toll high. There were reports by human rights organizations of Israeli war crimes, including the use of Palestinians as human shields.
حتى أنا كنت أقول له أنا درع بشري قدامك، هذا مش كويس، هذا إساءة. قال لي لا، إحنا كل شيء عنا جائز.
Millions of cubic meters of timber, tens of thousands of trees are cut down illegally in the Peruvian rainforest each year. In fact, Peru's timber trade is rife with corruption.
Casi todo es ilegal acá. Casi todo es ilegal. Toda madera dura que es para exportar sale de acá de Manantay. Todo va para el mercado internacional, ¿no? Todo el mundo sabe, las mismas autoridades saben. Todo es una cadena. Es un tema ya de corrupción más a gran escala ya.
Media is so central to how Americans think about things. It didn't happen if it didn't come on TV. It didn't happen if we don't have a picture of it.
Where do these images come from? What is the relationship between these images and American foreign policy in the Middle East?
What's their impact? Why do they matter?